Hello and hello, hello and hello, hello and welcome to part 2 of my review of Gerald's game. And so now I get to my problem in general with depictions of sexual violence in the media. I want to talk about it in the context of Gerald's game because this movie was probably the first time I've seen such a depiction done right. And let's go over why that is. First, it's because the sexual violence was the focus of the whole movie, and it wasn't the absolute worst sexual violence ever. Kind of just like Jessie said. Kind of. See, what I'm trying to say is really hard to say right because everyone has different pain thresholds emotionally, and I don't mean to dismiss anyone's pain, especially when it comes to sexual abuse, because sexual abuse causes pain a million times worse than most kinds of pain. But this is God, this is hard to articulate. And I might regret saying it later because it's not as clear-cut as I'm about to make it sound. But some sexual violence is worse than others. All sexual violence is the same in the majority of ways. All sexual violence is completely horrible. It's one of the worst things in existence. It's unforgivable. Like in Kesha's song Praying, which I just reviewed, some things only God can forgive, and I definitely think sexual violence is one of those things. But still, there are differences between different types of sexual abuse. So here, let me explain. I definitely feel like denial, it can be a cage, but it can also be a cushion. I think that's why it's the first stage of the grieving process, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I think denial gives you time to process and kind of just ponder what just happened to you so you don't hit the ground as hard. And some things are more deniable than others. And I think the type of sexual abuse that Jessie faced was a bit more deniable than others. I know it was for her, since she clearly tries to downplay it. There are a multitude of things that make that possible for her to try and do. For instance, she knew about rape, and she knew that he wasn't technically raping her. She didn't see or hear anything, so there were fewer sensations to remember, and so on and so on. God, I feel like I'm saying this so wrong, but I hope that you understand what I mean. She's not in denial about the fact that it happened, but about the severity of it, the evilness of it, how much it affected her. It affected her whole life, even at the end of the movie, in true-to-life fashion. She's still experiencing its effects, like with her hand and the writing of letters to her 12-year-old self, who is the only one, quote-unquote, who understands, apparently. Sad, right? And that's something that her free self really hammers home when Jessie is chained to the bed. All the ways Jessie has been sleepwalking since she was 12 and repeating unhealthy patterns since the incident happened. I'm not going to go over all that since the movie does an exceptional job of going over it itself, and it devotes its whole running time to it, basically. So I didn't feel like the movie was downplaying it in any way. Usually the opposite is true in movies and TV. Sexual violence is the worst kind, and usually, not always, the movie downplays it in some way. So my problem with depictions of sexual violence can be summed up like so. Depictions of rape either don't show the true extent of it, or they do. And in both cases, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch the rape scene or the movie it takes place in. I mean, regardless of whether I'd watch the movie as a whole, I think there's a case to be made for never showing graphic rape scenes. I just don't see who that's serving in the audience. If you're an empathetic person, you can imagine how horrible it was for the character. And if you're not an empathetic person, you can't imagine how horrible it was for the character, no matter what you see on screen. And besides, obviously, all the concerns about graphic violence in the media also pertain to graphic rape scenes. You know, does graphic violence desensitize people or even sometimes cause violence? In both cases, I think for sure yes, but that's a discussion for another time. Putting aside the actual rape scene, one can still ask whether the movie gets the depiction of sexual violence right in terms of showing the magnitude of the effect it has. And like I said, I usually don't like it either way, because if the movie does get it right, the characters are in so much pain I can't bear to watch. I tried watching The Haves and the Have-Nots once, and I got a few episodes in, and I was liking it when one of the characters got raped, and I was almost certain this was just another one of those shows that would have the character continue on like it wasn't that big of a deal. But I had just enough doubt that I kept watching, and the character actually killed herself afterward, or tried to. And I was like, yeah, that's what would likely happen. I didn't expect it, but it's realistic. But that didn't really make it any better. I had to quit watching because it was just so heartbreaking. So that's what happens when the movie or the show does get a depiction of a rape victim right. And if the movie doesn't get the depiction right, it's brushed off. Literally anything less than an accurately soul-crushing depiction of it is brushing it off. And that's horribly, the brushing off of it is horribly disrespectful to actual victims of rape and to anyone who can imagine what it's actually like. And that really pisses me off. I honestly think that people who make such movies are really sociopaths with no empathy. Like, how else could they bear to make movies with depictions of rape like that? It's because they can't imagine rape being that bad. To them, only the worst forms of sexual violence are even impactful, and then not impactful enough to focus the whole movie on it. I want to bring up the example of The Birth of a Nation. And this is going to be a little controversial, I'm sorry. But then everything I say is a little controversial. Anyway, The Birth of a Nation is the Nate Parker film that came out recently about a slave rebellion in the southern United States. Well, sorry. Well, I haven't seen the movie, but so I'm really sorry if I get some details wrong. But the movie starts with the gang rape of a black women by white men, and that prompts an uprising. The movie is about the heroic uprising, not about the rape of the woman, and that's just the start of the events of the movie. Well, just before the movie came out, we all learned that Nate Parker was accused of gang rape in college, and the victim killed herself recently. And Nate Parker then said some things that very strongly implied that he was guilty, even though he was never convicted. And even if he wasn't convicted, the other men who were accused were convicted. And Nate Parker remained friends with them and even gave one of them a job as a writer on Birth of a Nation, I think. I'm sorry if I get some details wrong. But knowing what I know about The Birth of a Nation, the film, nothing about Nate Parker surprises me. Once again, I think only psychopaths can bear to make movies with downplayed depictions of rape like Birth of a Nation had. So that's why Gerald's game stands out so much. The whole movie focuses on Jessie, and she triumphs. She learns to stop living in denial and to speak up about her experience instead of keeping it all inside. And she learns that she's able to defend herself, protect herself against the monsters. She's all grown up now, and she doesn't have to put up with their crap, basically. She doesn't have to take it. So yeah, that's my discussion of depictions of sexual assault in the media in the context of Gerald's game. Let me know if I said anything that sounds really wrong or heartless in this. I didn't mean to. If you just ask me what I meant, I'm sure I can tell you something that'll put your mind at ease about how I actually feel about it. I feel, very strongly about it, and I didn't mean to say anything that was heartless or discouraging. Okay. So yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you. Bye.